you. I think you all thought that DPI was digital public infrastructure, but now it's digital public intelligence. So we have re-christened it today, so welcome to the christening. So I'll speak about the digital public intelligence and what it means for India as a way forward. Now, India had, I don't know, you can't see the slides down there, or India's had a unique twist with technology, and we have used the concept of digital public infrastructure to solve India's problems. This is now well known, and Minister Jaishankar talked about how the DPI came to the fore in the G20 presidency of India. But what happened was that over the last several years, we built the Aadhaar platform, which gave an ID to 1.3 billion people. That led to the ability to do an electronic know your customer. That in turn led to the massive expansion of bank accounts done under Prime Minister Modi's Jan Dhan Yojana program. Several 100 million bank accounts were opened. And the same KYC enabled the mobile revolution and allowed firms like Jio and Airtel to dramatically cover the country, first with voice technology and then with data. So clearly, the foundation of this led to many other things, and that's how the whole DPI thing happened. And of course, we had the development of QR codes and UPI payments. UPI went from 0 in April of 2016 to 11 billion transactions a month today. 350 million people use this program, and there are more than 50 million merchants who take payments using UPI. And this photograph is an auto driver in Bangalore who has a QR code on his digital phone, and if he wants to take a payment, he just shows his phone and somebody uses the QR code. So that's how well this has penetrated everywhere. Now, QR codes, of course, have been used in other areas. Today in our education system, the Diksha platform has about 12 billion QR codes across 600 billion textbooks, and that has connected the physical world with the digital world, and that played a huge role in the pandemic to provide learning for millions of kids in our schools. And then, of course, we're using DPI in health. This is an outpatient registration which is happening across hospitals in India. So my point is that DPIs over the last several years have become pervasive, ubiquitous, and transformational in the way things happen in India. And there are some fundamental principles: interoperability, we have a minimalistic, reusable building blocks, making it innovative, so there's private innovation that happens on top of UPI, a decentralized architecture, and of course, focus on security and privacy right from the beginning. Now, one of the byproducts of DPI is what we call as data capital, digital capital, which is that when you do transactions in the digital world, those create digital capital or data, which you can then use to improve your life. For example, our credit system in India is dramatically changing with affordable credit for millions of small businesses, leveraging the digital footprint of their activities. So data capital has become a big part of what we're doing today, and we think that's going to also power economic growth. And then we're also looking at the whole issue of human capital and how to make sure that people get access to jobs, get access to education, get access to funding. And there's a network which has just gone live called the Open Network for Education, Skilling and Training, which collects all this together, again using a DPI approach. Again, another example of how we're using a way of thinking into new areas. But India, as you know, is a very country with huge variations in culture, markets, industrialization, regulations, fragmented. And what we are seeing now is all these things are helping to bring the country into a much more efficient single market. So the work of DPI, which has taken more than a decade, has essentially reduced friction, improved productivity, made society inclusive, enabled formalization, and so on. And now with AI coming along, we think that this is now giving us two new capabilities. One is demystifying complexity. In other words, how do you make sure that people have the right information, the right ideas, the right know-how at the right time at their fingertips. To give an example, can a farmer on his phone using WhatsApp in his own mother tongue, his Hindi or Tamil or whatever, get access to the most relevant information on farming practices for his job? So AI enables you to do that. So one role of AI is to demystify and remove complexity for each end person in a way that is we have never seen before. And then, of course, with generative AI, the ability to generate all kinds of things, text, videos, by the way, all the slides here use DALI, so it's an example of how we have commoditized generation. So basically, AI can essentially do all these things. So we think of that DPIs have brought us to this point, and now AI, with its ability to reduce complexity and make knowledge accessible, and with its ability to generate content, actually take us further on. So there's seamless transition from the DPI world of digital public infrastructure to the new world of digital public intelligence. That's our thesis. And the AI journey in India has actually been going on for some time. We have worked on Indian language AI. There's a Government of India program called Bhashini. There is an initiative at IIT Madras called AI for Bharat, which has focused on language. And one of our pioneer case use is in the Supreme Court. I don't know whether any of you heard Supreme Court Chief Justice Chandrachud on Constitution Day. There are more than 20,000 judgments that have been transferred into Indian languages, and all that is using AI. So AI has been in use in India for quite some time in the public space using these digital public intelligence. And it's also working in different areas. Right now there's a pilot going on for assisted language learning in 500 schools, where children are learning to improve their language skills using an AI solution. We have a product to read handwritten scribbles of children or teachers of what has happened, and beaming it up directly using AI. UPI, the payment system, now has a voice interface in Indian languages, so you can tell in Hindi that you want to make a payment to somebody. And there is a very important program at the Agriculture Ministry to bring all agricultural knowledge, including community knowledge, at the fingertips of farmers using AI. So it's not just theory. As we speak across India, in the public and the private sector, AI is actually being used to solve fundamental challenges for people by reducing complexity and improving access of knowledge to everybody at the time they need it. So what is it when you think about AI in the public space, or when you think about a digital public infrastructure view of AI, what is it that we are trying to solve? AI has basically three parts to it. It has, of course, computing capability, and we all know how expensive that is. You need to have GPUs. They cost millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars per GPU, and there's a big global shortage of that, so there's a whole compute challenge. We have the challenge of data and relevant data, because the data which is there in the current models is essentially English and stuff on the internet. So that's the bulk of how these models are trained. Whereas our challenge is, how do we have many Indian languages and stuff that is outside the internet? In other words, the data challenge in India is very different from the data challenge in the West. And then we see a lot of models. In the AI world, every morning there's a new model that is announced which is better than yesterday's model. So it's a rapidly changing world. So we have a world where we have, in India, we have a lack of low resource language data. We don't have enough data on Indian languages. Compute is very expensive and inaccessible, and we don't have our own foundational models. So we don't have our own foundational models. So how do you deal with this and bring AI to our challenges? And we think that the AI strategy should be use case led. In other words, outside in and not inside out. Because most of the AI conversations happening today is inside out. My model is bigger than yours, or whatever. We're not into all that. We're saying, how do we, okay, all this is great stuff, but how do we make a difference to the lives of people? how can the common man improve his life with AI? And we can only do that by having very good, compelling use cases that make a difference to people's lives, which is the whole DPI philosophy. It's not about, razzmatazz technology. It's about how do we make a difference to people's lives. And we think that once you have clear use cases, we should have we can use smaller models. One of the discoveries of this AI stuff is that a small model trained on the relevant data gives you better results than a generalized model which does everything. Now, generalized models are great for the consumer. The consumer wants to ask DALI or BARD or whatever it is to do something, it has to be highly generalized. But if you're solving specific problems for people, then you can have much narrower models which are trained on better data, which also have low inference cost. Because if you're going to develop AI for 1 billion people, and if they're going to use it in their daily lives, they can't pay $20 a month for this stuff. So we have to find a way to make inference very, very cheap, which means you need to think about it very differently. We have to make it compute efficient. We have to have very good data collection, because data is not there on the internet. You can't scrape it from anywhere. You have to actually collect this data from the field. So you have to think about data collection and, and much better deployment. So basically, when you think about applying AI on the ground to the real challenges of India, you have to think very differently. And that's what we say, that you start from outside in, start from use cases, and use narrow models with specific data. So what's happening is essentially a model of AI which we are thinking about, which is use open data sets so that anybody can use that data set, have an infrastructure to collect data across the country in a way that can feed into these models, use open source pre-trained models. There is a lot of work happening today in open source pre-trained models. We have, as you know, there are multiple debates in the AI world. There are boomers and doomers. Right? The guys who say that we go full speed ahead, and the guys who say that we're heading for extinction. And then there are the proprietary model guys and the open source model guys, and so on and so forth. There are all these battles. We are not into all the battles. We are only interested in using this technology to make the difference to people. That's all. We don't care about the battles. And we think that the open source world is generating so much of excitement and models. Today there's Llama 2, tomorrow there's Mistral. Last week there were 2 Chinese open source models that were launched. So fundamentally we think there's a lot of activity in open source models, and if we can train them with the right model and all that, we can get to where we want. And we can also create new ways of compute by, rather than having one big massive cloud of thing, you can have multiple clouds. And I think tomorrow morning, 7:30, there's a session by Pramod and Tanuj on what is a possible architecture for that, and so on. So we think that's a unique model that we can do, which is not just for India, but probably applies to many other countries. So essentially, what we are saying is DPI thinking brought to AI is the way we think about it. This is an example of that, instantation of that. Indic Trans 2 is open source data for language, Indian languages. It's been built at IIT Madras, and this chart says that over the last 5 years, there's a significant improvement in the quality of that for many, many Indian languages. And this has actually crowdsourced 10,000 hours of data from 5,000 participants. It's all new data, it's all spoken data in Indian languages, and is making that available as a public good. So anybody who wants to, for example, put in Indian language in their software can use this. So that's how we think about the infrastructure for this. So we think that, going back to our philosophy, digital public infrastructure was public rails for private innovation. Now we think about it as digital public intelligence with private innovation will make India the use case capital of the world. We're not in the we'll build a bigger model than you race. That's of no interest to us. We are in the business of using this stuff to make a difference to 1 billion people. And we think that we will demonstrate in the next few years. So we don't think AI won't change the world, but you will, and therefore it's all about people. It's about us doing it and having the right strategy. And another part, okay, so we talked about the AI debates, right? So there's the boomers and doomers. Boomers say full speed ahead on AI. What is also known as effective accelerationists. And the doomers are effective altruists. So that's one divide. We're not in that debate. The second divide is proprietary models versus open source models. We're not in that debate. The third model is AI for replacement versus AI for augmentation. In other words, the people building full self-driving cars, level 5 self-driving cars, are saying we don't need anyone to drive the car, it'll drive by itself. Whereas if somebody is building a very advanced driver assistant, the driver still is there, but the driver is amplifying his ability to drive with these things, which is what is happening. We are in the camp of AI for amplification. We are not in AI for replacement. We think that's not where to go. But if we can use AI to amplify human potential, if everyone can improve their lives with AI to access information, to give intent, to make transactions happen, improve their capabilities, and so on, that's where the action is. So our view is use AI for augmentation, not replacement, and this is what our philosophy should be. And then, of course, how do we then create a global talent? I think India has already led the way in terms of creating talent for many other areas, and we think we have an opportunity to create talent for AI. And again, that requires the infrastructure which allows millions of people to learn AI skills. In other words, use AI to learn AI. That's how we think about it. And if we can improve learning, then we can get, and that can service the world just like everything else. So DPI, it's not digital public is not just DPI plus AI. It's DPI to the power of AI. In other words, take DPI and apply AI to every part of it and amplify every part of it. That's how we think about this AI stuff. And so we see, last 10, 15 years we have built the digital infrastructure for, and we have seen the results of that. But the next decade is going to be applying AI and genuinely using this to further amplify and solving India's problems. Thank you very much. Questions?
Moderate some questions for Mr. Nilekani. It's easier if I do it from here. If you want to sit, please go ahead.
I can stand.
Keep an eye. Okay, so there are mics in different parts of the room. So perhaps if I could just ask you to get up to the mics in themselves as you kind of, okay. There are mics, as I said. If anyone's interested, there are mics across the room, so please ask any questions. But as people get organized, so this is quite a compelling new thesis of yours, Mr. Nilekani. And I can
unveiled at GTS.
Convene at GTS, and I can very much see that we are going to unpack this, unbundle this, or you are going to unpack this, unbundle this, and this is going to be something. I think in a year and a half, 2 years, or maybe even sooner when we are here, what is it going to take to make DPI equal quote unquote DPI?
No, I think we're on the journey. I think the strategic architecture of what we need to do is now fairly apparent. Now it's all about execution. And we already have a number of initiatives happening. In language, I think in the next couple of years, we'll be able to really dramatically make language accessible in your mother tongue to everyone. So that's a big deal, because if a farmer in Bihar can get the best farming information in Hindi on his phone, then that's a whole new level of empowerment we can do. So that stuff will happen. The other big thing will be applying AI for learning, because if we can really use this to amplify ability of human beings to learn, then imagine how we can upskill people who have skills, or how we can take people whose literacy is not so good to better literacy. So there's a lot of potential there. And then applying it to reduce complexity in our lives, because our lives are very complex. And if we can build these things in a way that the complexity is hidden behind the scenes using AI, and the user gets a very consumable, simple way of knowing things, we can fix a lot of things. All this will happen in the next 2-3 years.
I think if you want to ask a question, you're going to have to get yourself to a mic.
Hey,
or could we get mics out, please? Yeah. There's a question here. Could we just get some mics out? Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Nandan. Hi. This is Shreyans from Finsire. I run a small fintech company based out of Chennai. Much of what we build is on top of DPI. And to be honest, I was in the US for a few years and left and came back to basically build on top of the DPI. So, and what much of what you said and addressed today is very relevant because we technically, kind of say to ourselves that we are building the intelligence layer, much like the fourth layer of the India stack, right? Two things. And this fairly, I generally ask when I think of, how do we, what we have built on public infrastructure is obviously not taken, is not done pretty well overseas by different sort of governments, and I've lived in across 4 countries to see this. So I'm curious, how do you make the AA framework that you have in India as of today be supremely interoperable between different AA frameworks that are there globally, and rationally so, because there's one in Singapore now, which suggests.
Now you're talking about account aggregator?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the account aggregator framework, one, to make it supremely interoperable, just for the ambitions of FinSAR as well, because we would love to map the $500 trillion worth of assets that are there globally held by household. That's one, right? Number two, the intelligence layer.
I'm going to ask you to kind of speed it up
Sure.
because we've got a few other questions.
Sure. The intelligence layer, and you said use cases specifically, right? And the use cases, is it dwelling to the Indian households in various forms, like say credit, so on and so forth?
Yeah.
Or what do you mean by those use cases?
Yeah, see, I think to make our infrastructure globally interoperable is a different challenge, because now other countries have to adopt either our infrastructure or make theirs interoperable with ours. For example, Singapore, India now have made real-time payments possible because they took the Singapore fast pay and India and connected it. So that's not clear how that journey is going to be. And the AA infrastructure elsewhere is not yet developed the way we have done it here. So it'll take some time. But when I talk about use cases, I don't mean vertical use cases. See, if we can fix language, and if language is available to you as open data, then you in your fintech application can use that language to provide credit or whatever it is that you do to that person in that language, including mixed language. Most Indians speak a combination of Hindi and English or Tamil and English. You need, therefore, your AI has to understand our unique sort of behavior. So we will provide that, and that will amplify your ability to deliver your product to more consumers. So think of it as a kind of infrastructure that will make your ability to deliver products better. So it's not about credit or those are applications. This is infrastructure at scale, low cost, super efficient, low inference cost, fully open source, which can plug into your apps.
Alex.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks very much. Hello, Nandan. It's Alex Ellis, the British High Commissioner.
Hi, Alex.
I really like your use case approach because it makes the stuff intelligible to people like me. And one of the issues I think you have is exactly that, the number of people who are actually going to understand this stuff. But that wasn't my question. As you go along this, have you seen any areas where you think, and excuse me for talking like a civil servant, it's what I am, have you seen things which make you think, we're going to have to change laws here or significantly shift policy frameworks or incentives in order to enable it? So I haven't really heard that from you. I've heard, actually, we don't need to make big changes in laws to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Well, I mean, I can't fully predict whether it can be, many of the things can be done with existing laws. The same principles of security, privacy, and all that apply. There's an additional issue here of data, which is going to be how do you, under what principles do, but there are already frameworks for that. There are different ways you can frame your open data using, MIT license, Apache license, CCBY. There are many, many ways to do it. So I think a lot of that stuff is already there. We have to use it. There will be some new things. For example, one of the things in responsible AI is to say that my product should not cause harm. So then you may say in my licensing agreement, I put in clauses that say this data cannot be used to do surveillance or to do misinformation. So there's some extension that may be required, but I think we will evolve that as we go along. But the fundamental idea is start from the use case, start outside in. We are not interested in debates. You know what I'm saying, debates, right? You know where those debates are happening. So we are just interested in solving problems, and then once we are able to solve that, we'll know how to address the back-end debate.
Yeah, Mr.
The
Nilekani.
question over there. Yeah, please.
Yeah, good evening, sir. I'm Pankaj Vajpayee from IIIT Delhi. So we have a AI center funded by Infosys where we are actually teaching the AI thing. Just wanted your advice, sir, for what do you feel the educational institutions should be doing to promote this further for the students?
Well, I think, I think they have to go all in and, get their hands dirty and actually make it, because this is all experiential stuff. You can't teach it, you have to do it. And I think the good news is, once we create all this open data, and once you have access to open models, and once you have access to distributed computing capability, then your speed at which you can experiment with this will go up. And then you need to just get your kids working on these things.
On the data part, is the data collection framework going to be the toughest part?
We have one already called Shunya, which is an open source framework, which is being used for language, but can be used for anything else. So they're building the open source architecture for effective data collection from the ground, which is relevant to our social and business needs.
Again, question here, back here. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question. You touched upon the topic of augmentation versus replacement by AI. So, as a somewhat of a youngster myself, how does somebody approach, being facilitated by AI rather than replaced? Like, how would one prepare themselves for the future of AI and how it'll impact the work market?
You mean in the augmentation?
Yeah, like how does one ensure that they will be augmented and not replaced, basically?
You can't ensure anything.
Yeah, so
Don't try
so
it
how
that.
do you make your chances the highest rather than ensuring?
Well, I think I would say, first of all, focus on things AI will never do.
Yeah.
Human empathy, collaboration, leadership, those kind of things. AI can't do that, so get that right. Second, develop a model of continuous learning, because once you're in continuous learning mode, you will always be ahead of what's happening. And then everything that you do, look at what percentage of what you do is augmentable and what is replaceable, and then readjust your work life to that.
Okay. We had one question here. Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah, sir, can we use this stuff AI language for disabled people, deaf and dumb people?
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
sure. Yeah,
why not to make it in some smaller way so that they can be easy to carry?
No, I think that's a great point. In fact, one of the work we are doing is on the so-called purple economy of people with disabilities, and trying to see how they can be integrated. One is we need the transaction integration, and second, you can use the AI to be more sensitive to the needs. So, but it's early days yet.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you. Yeah, up there.
Yeah. Hi, Nandan. Great presentation. Amlan from Carnegie. So one of the big important premises of this thesis is that you don't need to build models, right? You have access to
No.
open source models.
Well, what I say is, if you work outside in, use case in, build the data for this, because the data is what is missing, right? We don't have Indian language data, we don't have audio data, we don't have local data. So fix the data problem. Organize that data in a model agnostic way. Use open source models and fine tune them with that data.
Right.
And let me assure you, in the next 3 years, models will become a commodity. Then you can build your own model.
Sure, yeah.
Don't waste your time on some model rat race. It's a mug's game.
The question only is, as of right now, there could be open source models with commercial restrictions. So is there, for example, Llama 2 as well. So is there a situation where, you're far into that journey where you realize some of these restrictions might impact progress, and so we must be investing, India should be investing in building these models as well right now?
Well, I'm making a bet that open source models will become more and more permissible, because that's also going to be competition, right? If I have two open source models and one of them is permissible and one is restrictive, I'll use the permissible one. So already if you compare Llama 2 with Mistral is a much more permissible licensing structure than Llama 2. So I think it's just going to, what's that? Huh? Yeah, markets will take care of this. You want your open source model to flourish, please make it permissible. So I think.
But is there a role for government to democratize
Amalan,
access
I'm
to
going to
compute?
ask you to take this to coffee, perhaps. But
Okay,
I
thank
think the
you.
question's been largely answered. Yeah, the gentleman back there.
Sir, good evening. So for all the AI that we are planning today at national level, the affected data, do we plan that all that data in zettabytes, petabytes, exabytes will be stored in data centers, or do we foresee that some part of data or maybe an extended part of data will be using decentralized storage, which will be much cheaper, much reliable, that kind of a thing, like platform like IPFS, SWARM, storage, instead
Okay, now
of...
you're getting into heavy detail. I mean, I don't care. I mean, we'll use that which is the most convenient. I don't think that's a strategic challenge.
Okay, Venki.
Nandan, there are 6 Indian languages in the top 20 languages of the world, but in terms of content on the internet, it's not very proportionate. How do you plan to get that kind of level of Indian language content, create that?
Yeah, that's what the work is happening with this Bhashini AI for Bharat. They are collecting massive amounts of data in Indian languages. They're converting that into consumable data which can be applied on any model. And then they build this open source infrastructure for data collection, the Shunya stuff. There's a product called Karya that Microsoft MSR has put out as an open source that is being used by some. So there are many things happening to create a huge influx of relevant Indian language data, because that's not on the internet. So internet is not going to solve your problem. So we have to find different ways to solve that.
Okay. Thank you.
Shiko.
Does it work? Yeah, it works. Good. Let me stand up.
You can just shoot. Yeah.
Good evening. So I love this conversation because it should have been what we had in the morning, some of the things that you raised in the morning. So 2 things. The one about the language data that you're collecting, is it oral or is it written? I know a lot of Indian languages already have a written version of it. Is it oral or written? Number 2, when you talk about DPI as digital public intelligence, have you thought about community intelligence, because we are a communal society?
No, I think both are great questions. That example I gave you of data collection are actually oral data. It's 5,000 hours of speech data in different languages. So the infrastructure will create oral data. Second, if you look at the work going on in this Kisan E-Mitra program, it's about communities' data getting in. So rather than rely on some research lab to tell you what to do on the farm, we're expecting other farmers to tell you based on their experience. So we're actually building infrastructure to create community data. So rather than, we're not into scraping the internet, it's about collecting data from the community and making it accessible to others. Both those.
Okay. I think that's Rosemary in the back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like the use case driven AI. My question is, do you have a crowdsourcing project currently that we can inject ourselves in? Because the use case is shared. I mean, there are certain...
Yeah. Sure. I mean, all the infrastructure for data collection at scale is available as an open source platform.
Okay. Specifically to 2 areas, health and climate.
Those are applications.
Okay.
To us, the infrastructure will allow you to collect data at scale. If you apply to health, you will get health data at scale.
Okay.
Apply to climate, you get climate data. That's a use case. That's a use case of infrastructure.
Okay. We'll come to you. Gentleman back there.
Hi, I'm Akash. So my question is, how do you tackle proliferation problem?
Huh?
Proliferation problem when open data sets, let's say, proliferation that people
Proliferation.
Proliferation.
So yeah, that people have, let's say, open data sets, and you can weaponize open data sets. Let's say you can make open AI models, and non-state actors use it, and they, let's say, they have their own private kind of AI models, and they weaponize it. So how do you stop it?
They can do it. Go ahead. What's the problem? If somebody takes this data and improve their private model, so be it. What's the big deal?
But let's say a non-state actor has it. So let's say nuclear technology, a non-state actor has nuclear technology.
Yeah, okay. So technically, what people are now doing on open data is putting licensing agreements on end use case. For example, if you look at the Dolma open data from Allen Institute for AI, which was launched a couple of months back, they have something called an impact license. And part of the impact license is they put a set of conditions for which this data cannot be used, like misinformation, surveillance, violence, or whatever. So you can put that in the licensing agreement. It doesn't mean the guy will honor it, right? But the fact is that I don't think you can stop this. You have to think of other ways to prevent non-state actors from doing what they do.
Question up here. Yep.
Just a quick question. My name is Immaculate Kasait, Data Commissioner from Kenya. How have you been able to navigate I have heard you talk about the league of challenges, but judicial challenges. Because many times when people adopt new technology, they're often challenged in the court of law, and it becomes a hindrance more in terms of implementation. If it's there, or how do you see, what would be your advice in terms of doing that?
Documents being challenged?
The whole process, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as documents are concerned, under our IT Act, we can have digital documents which we have provided for. It's long back. And today, for example, in a DigiLocker system, 200 million people have digital documents that are certified under the law that they can be used. So that problem already been solved. In the case of the AI world, one question is, what is the guarantee that the data on which the model has been trained does not violate IP? And therefore, do you indemnify me for that? And as you know, both Microsoft and OpenAI have now indemnified users of their technology that against any lawsuits of any challenge by anybody about the data. So I think that's the issue in the training data for AI. But otherwise, on the document side, it's a solved problem. And somebody here will be happy to share that with you.
Gentleman there, on the mic. Excuse me, sir, are you on the mic? Yeah, you want to ask a question? Okay, you don't want to ask a question? Okay, is there anyone else? You got to put your hand up. Yeah, Anirudh, could you get a mic up here? So clearly, standing mics are not doing very well.
So my question actually comes to one other piece that you've talked about, which is talent. Right? So if you look at the existing model of AI competitiveness, which is dependent on these large models, dependent on high-tier talent, research talent, which all seems to be concentrated in one geography or two. In your model, it seems to me that the talent problem might be a different nature. So can you talk more about that, and where India is placed on making sure that we have the talent that we need to do and execute the vision that you are talking about?
I don't think the talent issue is solved yet, but I think part of the vision is how do you democratize talent creation by making the content for talent creation uniquely accessible and by using AI to teach AI. In other words, if we can find out how this AI can make learning faster, then we can use learning AI to teach you AI, right? So there are a number of things. I mean, the early days here, to be honest, and I can't say that it's been cracked, but I think in the next few years, our goal is to actually accelerate learning with AI, which we think is a huge use case.
Okay. You got a question here? Yeah?
I'm a client speaker as a professor.
Professor, okay.
I think, Professor, you better take a mic.
Professors know how to speak without mics. I mean, we're used to it. Just a joke.
Thank you. Wonderful ideas for improving. How can the international community contribute to your vision in India? So can you...
international community.
And I do come from Penn State University. And
there are many delegates. Join the movement.
And again, just as you say, right, we would appreciate where are ways in which you really think you could get momentum from international partners.
No, this is a large tent. This is a large tent.
That's right.
You can come into the tent, no problem. Every international researcher can come into the tent. It's an open thing. There's no agenda. It's just open, collaborative. Please join the moment.
Thank you. Maybe the other meetings will give us more specifics. Thank you.
If I could just ask you though, just picking up on that question, at Carnegie, we were late starters to the kind of DPI story in a serious research kind of way. But one of the clear problems that we had with DPI was in communication, is for people to actually understand DPI, and it took a lot. There are a lot of negotiators here who had to break many eggs, even within their own bureaucratic teams, to just try and explain what this means. I just wonder, you've got clearly a novel thesis. I can already see that novel thesis translate into reality. Do you think one of the key issues that you're going to have to deal with from day one here is actually trying to explain to people, okay, what is digital public intelligence? How does it? One is that you've got AI augmenting this stuff and maximizing it, but do we need kind of now a process of grammar, syntax, language?
So just like Dr. Jaishankar, I'm outsourcing that to you.
I think we're at full capacity right now.
I think Tino will organize more funds for all this, don't worry.
Any questions back there? I saw a hand. Yeah? No. Otherwise, let's bring this to a close. Mr. Nilekani, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you.
And taking the time. And I think we're going to be coming back to this one a lot.
Thank you so much.